I work at a small, independent bookstore tucked into a sleepy block between a tailor's shop and a chiropractor's office. By day, we smell like paper and lemon cleaner, by night, like dust and the faint vanilla of old bindings. We close at 9. I sweep the aisles, straighten the staff picks table, count the register twice, and shut off the lamps one by one until the front windows turn into mirrors. The lot behind the store is small, 10 spaces, a cracked asphalt strip with a single crooked light pole. My car sits under it like a kid told to wait after class. I never minded the routine. Quiet felt safe. Predictable felt safe. And then, 1 week into the new schedule, quiet started paying too much attention to me. I noticed him the way you notice a typo in a headline, a tiny wrongness you can't unsee once you've seen it. Across the street from our front door, under the city lamp that flickers every couple of minutes, a man stood with his shoulder to the post and his face turned toward the glass. He didn't shuffle. He didn't pace. He didn't even pretend to check his phone like normal people do when they're killing time. He was fixed there, as if he'd been drawn around by chalk. The first night, I made a reasonable story out of him. Waiting for a bus. Waiting for a date. Waiting for the same flicker of the lamp that I kept waiting for, just to prove time still moved. I locked up, kept my keys bristling between my fingers because movies taught me that, and walked to my car like I wasn't aware of every echo my footsteps made. The second night, he was in the same place. Same tilt of the head. Same hands, one in a pocket, the other resting against the post like he needed it to keep his balance. I tried to study him without making it obvious: average height, nondescript jacket, cap pulled low. The kind of face your brain slides off of. The kind of person you couldn't describe to a sketch artist even if your life depended on it. I told myself he was just a coincidence with shoes. By the third night, coincidence had worn out its alibi. He didn't follow me with his eyes when I turned the sign to closed. He'd already been looking. He didn't move closer when I stepped outside. He didn't need to. His stillness felt like movement anyway, the way a painting can feel like it's breathing if you stare long enough. I paused on the threshold and listened hard, as if the street could explain him to me. It was the usual, distant traffic, a couple arguing 2 blocks down, the hum of our old neon open sign cooling to silence. Everything ordinary, except him. I mentioned it to my manager in the most casual voice I could borrow. He shrugged the way people shrug when the world hasn't happened to them yet. If he's not on our property, there's not much to do, he said, like it was weather. You want to leave out the back for a while? That's fine. He said it kindly, but kindness doesn't change facts. Kindness doesn't lift a weight off your chest if the weight is real. That night I did what he suggested. I cut the lights, pocketed my keys, and ghosted through the receiving room to the alley door. The metal was cold against my palm. When it swung open, the air smelled like rain that hadn't committed yet. I crossed to the lot, every step sounding too loud. I glanced back over my shoulder at the front windows reflecting the street. If he was out there, I couldn't see him from here. If he wasn't, I still felt like the outline of him was. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself lots of things. None of them made the feeling go away. For a few nights, the back door became my ritual. I learned the rhythm of it: flip the deadbolt on the front, count the till, kill the lights, and then slip through the receiving room where cardboard dust hangs in the air like a second atmosphere. I'd pause at the metal door, listening, the way you listen when you're about to dip your hand into dark water, then push out into the alley. At first, the change helped. The alley opened into the small lot behind the store, and there was something comforting about seeing my car right there under the crooked pole, like a dog waiting faithfully where you left it. I told myself the man across the street had been a blip, a pattern my brain invented because routine is a magnet for fear. The feeling didn't agree, but I bargained with it. I said, "Look, I'm being careful. Look, I'm not walking past him anymore. Look, we're fine." The nights stacked up. 2, 3, 4. On the 5th, I even laughed at myself while locking up, soft, embarrassed. I put on a playlist too cheerful for closing time and sang under my breath as I straightened a table of staff picks no one ever actually picked. Normal seeped back in like warm air under a door. Then a small thing went wrong and took the scaffolding with it. Our back door sticks when humidity is high. That night, it wouldn't budge. I braced my shoulder against the metal, tried the handle twice, then 3 times. It gave an inch and slammed back like someone pushed from the other side. I considered calling my manager, imagined the conversation, "It's just swollen, give it a shove," and felt ridiculous. I tried again, harder. No luck. Which left the front. If a story wants you to walk through a particular door, you can argue with it all night, but the knob will still end up in your hand. I took a breath long enough to make my ribs ache and started the slow walk up the center aisle toward the glass. The overnight returns bin gleamed a dull silver in the dark. Our neon open sign, turned off, was a quiet red bruise in the window. I cupped my hands to the glass and looked out. The street lamp across the way was doing its 2-minute flicker. The storefronts opposite were blank-eyed. And the corner where he had stood before, an empty angle of sidewalk, nothing anchoring it but night. "You see?" I told the feeling. "You see?" I stepped out. The bell over the door gave its little funeral chime and fell silent. I locked the top and bottom and turned toward the lot that wrapped around the side of the building. The night air held the memory of daytime heat and the metallic taste of an oncoming storm. I kept my keys in my hand the way all the articles say to. I kept my steps even, too, so I wouldn't look like I was running from nothing. My car was right where I'd left it, a dark beetle under the pole. Relief made me clumsy. I fumbled the key fob, dropped it, laughed again, too loud in the quiet, and bent to pick it up. That's when I saw it. A square of pale yellow clung to the windshield, a little flag of attention right over the driver's side wiper. It was nothing, a sticky note, the most ordinary object in the world, and my brain still outpaced my body by 3 full seconds before I reached for it. I knew what it was before I read it. I just didn't know what it would say. I peeled the note away. The adhesive made a small sound like lips parting. The handwriting was neat, almost careful, the kind of letters you learn from a primer. 4 words, black ink, no name. Why are you hiding? The question landed in me like a dropped coin, small, heavy, echoing. I looked up so fast my vision laced with sparks. The lot was a stage with no actors. The alley mouth was a mouth, closed. The street in front of the store offered no audience except the lamppost and the flicker that kept missing a beat. I turned in a slow circle, the note still open in my palm, because there's a rule about moments like this, you must give the world a chance to explain itself. It didn't. As if to underline that, the pole light chose that instant to blink and hold, bathing the asphalt in a weak halo. I checked the cars around me, 2 others, both familiar, both belonging to tenants in the apartments above the chiropractor. I checked the sidewalk. I checked the reflection in the store window and saw myself there, a person trying to look like she wasn't looking. A person holding a question that shouldn't exist. I unlocked the car with a hand that wasn't entirely steady and slid in. I locked the doors. Then I did something I'm not proud of. I drove 3 unnecessary loops around the block, as if motion could tangle whatever thread had led him to me. At the 3rd corner, I saw the lamppost again. Empty. The flicker again. Faithful. At home, I set the note on my kitchen counter and stared at it like it might confess. I took a photo, then deleted the photo because it felt like proof of something I didn't want proof of. I told myself not to make it bigger than it was. I told myself lots of things. Sleep didn't believe any of them. By morning, the message had swollen to fill my apartment. It breathed with me. Why are you hiding? It's a question with an accusation inside it, the way a seed has a tree inside it. Hiding from what? From whom? From him, obviously, and also from the idea that he knew something about me I didn't know about myself. That evening, I dressed for work like I was going to war in civilian clothes. I put the sticky note in my pocket, a talisman that worked in reverse. I decided, out loud, because sometimes you have to hear yourself be the kind of person you want to be, that I wasn't going to run anymore. If he was there, I would see him. If he wasn't, I would stop building a cathedral out of fear. When 9 o'clock came and the last customer drifted out with a paperback thriller and a receipt, I let the door chime finish ringing before I flipped the sign to closed. I didn't go to the back. I went to the front. I stood in the window under the dim store lights and looked across the street where the lamppost kept its pulse. And there he was. Exact same place. Exact same posture. The question in my pocket pressed against my hip like a hand. I turned the deadbolt, stepped out into the warm night, and this time, I didn't look away. I didn't confront him. I didn't wave. I didn't even cross the street. I just walked. Not toward him, parallel. I kept the bookstore at my back and drifted along the sidewalk as if I were considering the window displays, a thrift shop with headless mannequins, a locksmith's door bristling with blank keys, a pet groomer sign shaped like a bone. I could feel him in my periphery the way you feel an elevator move, not with your eyes, but with your balance. He didn't react. No flinch, no tilt of the head to mark that he'd noticed me changing the script. I let the distance stretch, 10 paces, then 20, before turning at the corner and continuing down the block. A crosswalk blinked the white walking figure. Traffic murmured like a sleeping thing. At the next intersection I stopped and looked back. He had detached from the lamppost as quietly as a shadow stepping off a wall. He wasn't following me, not exactly. He was walking in the same direction, unhurried, hands in his jacket pockets, looking straight ahead as if we were two strangers sharing a sidewalk but not a purpose. I tried to pin details to him like labels on specimens: average height, average build, dark cap pulled low, a parka that could have come from any winter rack at any discount store. What stuck with me wasn't what he was, it was the absence of anything to hold on to. His face was not blurred, but my memory treated it like it was. We passed a bus stop. No bus came. A woman tugged her dog along the opposite curb. The dog glanced at us once and refused to look again. The air smelled like old rain and hot asphalt and someone's dinner cooling behind a second-floor screen. I kept him ahead of me now, letting him draw me forward as if there were a string tied from his shoulder to my wrist. 3 blocks. Past the tailor's shop, past the chiropractor's office, past a church whose marquee said "Be kind or be quiet." I told myself I wasn't following him, I was following my fear, and letting it point to where it lived. He turned without looking at me, a small right into a narrow service lane beside an old brick building. I gave him a 20 count, then another 5 to be brave, and slipped around the corner after him. The alley was an architectural shrug, a leftover space. One side brick, one side cinder block, both painted with equal neglect. Trash bins stood like dull green sentries. A string of utility meters glinted dull in the dim. The alley dead-ended into a blank wall and a welded-up door that looked as if it had been out of use since someone's childhood. He was gone. Not farther down the alley, there wasn't any farther. Not behind a bin, I checked, heart hammering, breath shallow enough to sting. No back gate hung open. No loose board in the fence. No footsteps fading. No sound at all except my own pulse in my ears and the slow drip of a pipe that had decided to leak. I took 2 slow steps forward, then 2 foolish ones, the way people do in movies right before the worst thing happens. The air felt stale, like a room shut too long. I touched the welded door with my fingertips. Cold. I looked up. The sky was a narrow ribbon between roofs, a slit of ink with one tired star. I turned back toward the street because there was nowhere else to turn. The alley gave nothing back, not even an echo to prove I'd been there. When I reached the sidewalk, I looked left and right with the helpless hope you save for asking a question you know no one can answer. The block was empty. I walked home with my keys clenched so tight they imprinted half-moons in my palm. Behind me, the city kept breathing. In front of me, the sticky note in my pocket softened with sweat. Why are you hiding? That night, my apartment felt misbuttoned. I kept thinking I'd hear a knock at the door. I kept thinking I wouldn't. I slept with the lamp on and dreamed of lampposts anyway. Morning tried to make a joke of it. Sun across the kitchen table. Coffee that tasted like competence. My phone buzzed with a text from my manager about a shipment of calendars that had arrived in August like a bad punchline. I almost told him everything, and then I didn't. What could I say that wouldn't sound like I was auditioning for my own worst thoughts? At work, routine shouldered me forward. Customers asked where we kept the travel guides to countries no one could afford this year. A kid spent 40 minutes reading on the carpet in children's and left with a book and a grin that made my day ache in a good way. I shelved hardcovers that thunked into place, spines making that small papery hiss. The world seemed capable of being normal without consulting me. But the note lived in my pocket. I'd pull it out between tasks and stare at those 4 careful words, trying to decide if they were a threat or an invitation. Both, maybe. The hand that wrote them, neat, patient, felt like someone who could wait a very long time. At lunch, I walked the block where I'd followed him. In daylight, the alley looked smaller, less like a throat and more like a shrug. Same welded door. Same bins. Same ribbon of sky. I stood at the mouth of it like someone considering the ocean from the safety of the sand. A delivery truck growled past, the driver didn't glance my way. I stepped in as far as where my shadow met the shade and stopped. There's bravery, and there's bait. I didn't want to be either. I told myself a dozen rational explanations. He slipped into a recessed doorway I'd missed. He doubled back while I checked the bins. There was a service entrance I hadn't recognized. He knew the alley better than I did. People are good at disappearing if they practice. All day, a smaller question nested inside the big one: what would have happened if I'd called out? If I'd said, "Why are you watching me?" Would he have answered with words, or with the same silence he'd used to speak so far? At closing, I chose the front door again. A choice is a spell you cast on yourself. I needed one that said I wasn't prey. I locked up, let the bell chime once, and stood a moment in the doorway, looking at the lamppost and the stretch of sidewalk where he had become a habit of the night. The post flickered. The street was empty. I walked to my car with every sense pricked like a cat's. The lot smelled like wet cement and a whisper of gasoline. My car sat obediently under the crooked light, a dark beetle with tired eyes. There was no sticky note this time. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there listening to the engine idle as if it could translate the quiet for me. On the drive home, I watched the rearview mirror more than the road ahead. My building greeted me with its familiar chipped banister and the neighbor's fern that keeps trying to die. Inside, I checked the closets as if a man who could dissolve in an alley might choose to solidify among my coats. I didn't see him again that week. Or the week after. Nothing happened, which is its own kind of haunting. Relief came back in nervous, careful sips. The sticky note migrated from my pocket to a drawer, from the drawer to the fridge door under a magnet shaped like a lemon, as if pinning it there could turn it into a grocery list. But a sentence can be a room you don't realize you've moved into until you notice all your furniture fits. Why are you hiding? The answer I didn't say out loud was, I'm not. The answer under that answer was, maybe I am. On a slow Thursday, a storm rolled through, long, patient thunder, rain that drew vertical pencil lines across the street. People stayed home. The store went quiet enough that I could hear the building's bones. I did the closing tasks early because that's what you do when a mood settles over a place, you tidy it like a guest is coming. 9 o'clock arrived. The last lamp went dark. The front windows turned into mirrors again. I stood there longer than usual with my palm against the cool glass, watching the lampost's white cone of rain. It felt like standing on a dock and looking at a lake you once almost drowned in. I stepped out. The bell chimed. Water ticked off the awning. I pulled my hood up and walked, keys ready, heartbeat steady. At the corner of my eye, the way memory lives in peripheral vision, I felt it, that sense of being observed. Not seen, not watched from a single pair of eyes, but regarded, as if the whole street had turned its face toward me. I turned deliberately, a full sweep of the lot, the storefronts, the dim apartments stacked above them. No one. Nothing. Just the rain doing its careful work. I told myself to stop making weather into a message. I crossed the lot, and that's when I noticed the second thing wrong, not a note, not a figure. My car was parked one space over from where I'd left it. It was a small difference, barely a car's width, but the brain knows its own rituals. I'd parked under the pole's light stain when I arrived, now my car sat slightly out of it, as if nudged by a hand. For a few seconds, the world turned too loud. I told myself the most reasonable story, I misremembered. Or the maintenance guys moved it for some bizarre reason. Or I was finally letting fear make a fool of me. I walked the last steps anyway. There were no scratches on the asphalt from tires turning. No footprints in the wet. Just the car, sullen and ordinary. I unlocked it, slid in, locked the doors. The cabin light clicked off like a coin falling into a slot. I put my forehead to the wheel and laughed once, sharp, humorless, because what else do you do when nothing happens in a way that feels like everything? I checked the rear view. A trick of the rain made the lampost's reflection look like a person for half a breath. When the breath ended, the person went with it. At home, I pulled the sticky note off the fridge and set it on the table. I wrote underneath the question, in my own handwriting, smaller than his but just as careful, "I'm not hiding." The moment the period dried, I knew that wasn't true. I'd been taking the back door. I'd been avoiding the front. I'd been avoiding the conversation I wanted and dreaded in the same heartbeat. The next night, I made my decision into a ritual. I would not avoid. If he was there, I would face him. If he wasn't, I would face the idea of him, which might be harder. 9 o'clock. Door chime. Warm air. The street lamp clicked its steady metronome. Across the street, in the rain's leftover shimmer, the lamppost leaned like a question mark. No one stood under it. I locked the door and stepped onto the sidewalk. I didn't look back at the store. I crossed the street and stood where he had stood, my shoulder to the post, my face tipped toward the bookstore's dark windows. I tried on his stillness. It felt like wearing someone else's coat, heavy in the wrong places. "Why are you hiding?" I said into the empty block. My voice sounded too clear. It didn't echo, it didn't need to. The word hiding tasted like a key I wasn't sure I wanted to turn. Rainwater dripped from a gutter in a patient rhythm. Somewhere, a TV laughed through thin apartment walls. A bus rolled past with only the driver inside, fluorescent and lonely. I waited until my nerves stopped sprinting. Then I did what I'd promised myself the night of the note, I walked. I took the same path he had taken, down the block, past the Be Kind marquee, past the nail salon with its neon hand, to the mouth of the alley beside the old brick. In dry weather, the alley smells like old dust. After rain, it smells like coins. I stepped in with my palms open, not to show I was harmless, but to prove it to myself. The alley was exactly as memory had kept it, bins, meters, welded door, narrow sky. It was also different in the way a place is when you've returned not as a witness but as a participant. I went all the way to the end, to the blank wall that stops every story unless a door is cut in. There was no door. "Where did you go?" I asked the bricks, because sometimes you need to make your questions into sound. The bricks didn't answer. Something dripped. Somewhere a compressor kicked on and hummed like a throat clearing. I stood there long enough for the city to forget me and then remember. Long enough for the thought I'd been dodging to step into the light. Maybe the point wasn't him. Maybe the point was what I did when he wasn't there. When I turned to leave, I noticed it, a second lamppost shadow falling into the alley at an angle that didn't make sense. I stepped forward, trying to line my body up with it, and realized it wasn't a shadow, it was residue, an old, long rectangle on the brick where a door had once been and had been bricked over, tidy and permanent. If you squinted, you could see the faint outline of hinges buried under paint like fossils. So there had been a door. Once. Did he slip through a crack in time? Did he step into a memory of the building that still clung to the air? Or was there a perfectly sensible recess I hadn't seen, a security gate I'd overlooked, a route through a basement known to the maintenance crew and no one else? I made a list in my head of ordinary answers and set them side by side with the one that didn't fit, the one that felt truest. He wanted me to follow the question, not the man. I walked back out to the street lighter than I expected, not because I had solved anything, but because I'd finally stood in the place where the not knowing lived. Sometimes stepping into the uncertainty is smaller than the fear of stepping into it. I didn't see him again after that. Weeks went by, then months. The lamppost kept its vigil. The alley kept its leak. The store kept selling calendars we didn't need. Life said, keep going. I did. But some nights, when I close and the windows turn to mirrors, I pause longer than the tasks require. I watch the lampposts beat. I listen for a silence that feels like someone saving their breath. On those nights, I don't park in the same place twice. Not because I'm hiding anymore, but because I've learned that routine is a map, and maps aren't for other people. They're for you. No point in drawing one for a stranger to memorize. The sticky note is back on my fridge. His question faces out. Under it, in my smaller script, I added one more line, an answer that keeps changing as I do. I'm not hiding. I'm watching back.